Welcome everybody to Mom Street USA. My name is Jackie, aka Wishes Mama, and I am joined as always by my wonderful co-host Kate, aka the Disney Sisfrone. And for this episode of Mom Street USA, we are going to be talking about one of the most important parts, I think, of planning your park days for your Disney vacation, and that is rope drop and rope drop strategies. So we're going to dive into kind of our input on this topic and hopefully give you guys some good information to help you plan your rope drop strategy on your next trip. Kate, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. I think it's funny that we kind of had a mini conversation before this when you texted me earlier and you're like, wow, you really went hard on your notes. Like you have a lot of things to say. And I was like,
I pulled up our shared notes and I was like, whoa, Kate wrote a whole book. I wrote a couple little sentences just to remind myself what I wanted to say. But Kate wrote paragraphs for us today.
I had to think it out. And it's mostly mine was for Disneyland and Disneyland Paris.
Yes.
First of all, Disneyland Paris, I really had to think about it because I haven't been there that often. But Disneyland, I usually go there by myself these days. And I don't, right. I rope drop, but I kind of go to what I need to go to versus what my family would do. So I really had to think it through. And so writing it out helped me think it through. But I think this will be really helpful. But before we kind of dive into the actual parks and the strategies, Jackie, we should probably talk about what is rope drop? Why is it important? Yes. Why are we talking about it?
Yeah, because I feel like, there's so much terminology with Disney and Disney trips, right? So many abbreviations, so many terms. It's like, okay, let's talk about what rope drop actually means. So rope drop comes from when I think the majority of the parks used to open, they physically would have a rope. And some of them still do in certain parts of the parks, in certain parts of the country. And they physically will lower the rope, drop the rope. So that way you know that you are free to enter the worlds and enjoy your attractions and experiences. Now
they don't drop it so much as they wind it up.
They
and then they
it's like a tripping hazard. We don't want that. Yeah. So now, depending on what park you're at, when you're going, when it's opening, are you doing early entry or not? It's a different kind of situation with that. But basically, rope drop means when the park opens and you're able to physically go get in lines for attractions.
Right. You're the first people in the parks, the earliest part of the day. And rope drop, we always say rope drop is so, so, so important. Even if you're not a morning person, which I get, it's your vacation. I am a night owl. I hate getting up early. Mornings are the worst for me, but I am up so early on Disney days because I know if you don't get to the parks early, those morning hours are the most golden hours of the entire day. It beats even late night, even then. There's very little waits for a lot of things. And you can get so much done in those first hour or two of the day before everybody else starts dripping in from sleeping in and having breakfast and having a slow morning or whatever. You're beating all of them and getting all this stuff done so that then you can, when everybody else is starting to get in line, you can take a break and go have lunch early or, it makes your day so much more efficient and you wait a lot less in line. So very, very important to get there early.
Yes. And that being said, just a quick little note that I have found, if you are someone who wants to plan a character breakfast or a really nice sit-down breakfast, try to plan it on a day that maybe you're not going to the parks if possible in your schedule, or plan it on a day where you're maybe going to a park for a second time and already did rope drop there, something like that, just to really be able to utilize that morning time and plan your breakfast accordingly. We like to do grab and go breakfasts or, a little bit of a snack and then plan to do a later breakfast brunch kind of meal. So just kind of think about what you think will work best for your party, but I would really suggest having a good plan for breakfast so that way that's not slowing you down during rope drop.
Yeah, we usually do breakfast in our room. If I don't have groceries delivered, I'll usually pack stuff in our suitcase that is shelf stable that we can then eat. And then we'll just have an early lunch. And that works out really well for my family.
Yeah, cereal, granola bars, Pop-Tarts, mini muffins, all those types of things are usually what we end up having. So that really saves us a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I know that we're going to tackle 3 different resorts in this episode, so we should probably get moving. But I think we're going to go to Disney World first. I think that's one we kind of get asked about the most. So, Jackie, do you want to dive in there?
Yeah, so we are going to talk about all 4 parks at Disney World, then we're going to jump to Disneyland, do both parks there, and then Kate's going to give us some insight on Disneyland Paris as well. So we'll hit that at the end here. But as far as Disney World goes, we are going to discuss rope drop, but we're not going to touch on lightning lanes today. I know that that can be a really big aspect of your rope drop, but we're kind of talking before your lightning lane times are scheduled or without lightning lanes today, just because it gets too complicated with the new multi-pass system and single pass system. It's just really hard. So if you are utilizing lightning lanes and listening to this for some input, you may still decide to do rope drop kind of according to what we do and adjust your lightning lane plans accordingly. If you want to maximize rope drop and not do lightning lanes right away, that is an option that you obviously have. I would suggest starting your lightning lanes probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours after you intend to set foot in the park for either early entry or for just park open, to give yourself enough time to kind of burn through some rides, so to speak, before you start using your lightning lanes. And if you want more on lightning lanes and strategy and what to book when and all of that type of thing, episode 63 of Mom Street, we did an entire episode on lightning lanes and the newest system and things like that. So go there if you're looking for that aspect of all of this.
And I'm also going to mention that I will probably chat about lightning lanes just a little bit in the Disneyland section, just because it's a completely different system there. So it's more relevant, I guess.
Yes, I agree with that. So yes, that was kind of the overall decision that we made to kind of streamline the information and make it's just too many options, right? You know, we will really get into the weeds and get to, all these branches in the road if we go through the lightning lanes. So we've done that already. Go to that episode if that's what you're looking for. But let's start with what I think is the hardest part to navigate, and that is Hollywood Studios. So we're going to start with the hardest and work our way through. Yeah. I really, truly think that this park is the hardest to navigate, both logistically with queues and lightning lanes, which, like I said, we're not going to talk about that, but strategically, all of that. It's just not set up in a very nice way that you can really navigate and walk through without having to do a lot of backtracking, unfortunately. The setup of the park makes routes very difficult. There's really no good way to walk to hit all of the park. Whereas you'll see, like when we talk about like Magic Kingdom, you can really easily kind of make like a circular sweep motion. Animal Kingdom, same thing. They're really just set up a lot nicer. Hollywood Studios is terrible.
Yeah, that's because all the Sunset Boulevard, that entire area was added much later than the rest of the park. And then, of course, like Batu was added a lot later than everything else. And so everything's just been completely changed since the way it was originally planned when it was opened. So,
well, and it doesn't seem like we're very used to like the hub and spoke model, so to speak, for a lot of these theme parks that we talk about. And it doesn't really seem like Hollywood Studios was ever set up to be that way, unfortunately. So when they did start adding all of these extra pieces and parts and lands, it was like, well, we just have to tack it on at the end somewhere. So it's very linear. You get a lot of linear where you have to go down and back,
like
or
a big
up and back
circle with like a line in the middle.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yes.
And but you have to think a lot of that park was the back lot when it first opened. Like the majority of it wasn't even something you could access by foot when it first opened. And there was like, they actually filmed things there and whatnot, like that was the intention of the park. And so now they're just like, they just kind of tack things on and wherever they had space, which I think they're going to continue to do. I think that's just how that park's going to be.
Yes, unfortunately, I think so too. Okay, so let's talk about rope drop, early entry time, all that kind of things. I do want to mention, I don't think we specifically said in this episode, there is a difference between what you will hear us refer to as early entry and park open. So park open is the posted time on your app that you will see the park opening. Hollywood Studios lately has typically been like a 9:00 open. Sometimes it's earlier, it just really depends. So definitely check your app and check it frequently. But if you are someone who is staying on property at an on-property Disney resort, you get what they call early entry access. And that is 30 minutes prior to park open is when you are able to get into the park. So you'll hear us talk about kind of on property versus off property, early entry versus park open times, because those 30 minutes don't sound like a lot, but they really can shift your approach to the parks. I would suggest with Hollywood Studios that you're going to want to arrive an hour before whatever time you can get in, because especially for early entry, this park frequently opens earlier than the early entry time. So if your early entry time is 8:30 for a 9 o'clock full park open, you want to get there at 7:30. I've seen the park open as early as an hour before, 45 minutes before, and that is a massive difference at Hollywood Studios.
Yeah. It's always amazing that I hear people as we're walking in, they're like, oh my gosh, it's already open. And they're just like,
yeah.
So yeah, because that's not something that Disney makes known. And it's because it's not something they can guarantee. You know, it depends on staffing. It depends on rides. It depends on all kinds of things. And some rides are not open that early.
Right.
Like they'll say like, oh, you know, Rise is down, or like, you know, they'll like redirect you to another place because they're like, this one's not up yet, you know?
Right.
I say Rise because Rise is usually the one that's not.
Yep.
It's not an early riser. It's like me. It like takes its time to get up
in the mornings. But yeah, so oftentimes you will come up for what you think is like early entry and nobody is being held at the gates because they've already been let through. So I would highly suggest to plan for that now. When we talk about arriving, that means you are like arriving at the gate an hour ahead of time. That means you need to leave time for, depending on how you're getting there, right? If it's Skyliner, if it's bus, if it's your car, if it's a Lyft or an Uber, whatever that may be, you need to leave time for that. You need to leave time for security and just walking time. It's not too far at Hollywood Studios from wherever you may be getting dropped off, whether it be no matter what kind of transportation you're taking, it's not that far, but you still need to plan an extra probably 10 minutes to walk through and get to where you want to be. So arriving an hour before time is what I highly suggest for that park.
Yeah.
And then your strategy really needs to come, and this goes for any park, but really needs to come from what rides are most important to you, especially at Hollywood Studios, though, because there are so many what we would consider e-ticket attractions. You've got Slinky Dog, you've got Rise of the Resistance, you've got Rock and Roller Coaster, you've got Tower of Terror, you've got so many options. So you really need to look at what your priority is and what your group's priority is and kind of go from there and have that plan.
Yeah, I do have a question from Amber. Do most Walt Disney World hotel buses get you to the parks on time? Typically, they start running about an hour before. This is true for all Disney transportation. Usually about an hour, sometimes a little bit earlier than the listed park opening time. So whether or not it gets you there on time depends on how many buses they send, how many people are waiting at your particular bus stop and whatnot. I would recommend
where you're coming from, how far it is from your resort to that particular park.
Right. Typically, though, yes, you can get there early before park open. You can't get there like super like first thing early if you are taking Disney transportation. You have to really just drive yourself if you want to do that. But I've never had a hard time getting there early on Disney transportation, just allowing a lot of time for it. That's all.
And I will say they claim the buses run an hour before park open. It's almost always earlier than that.
It's like an hour and a half.
At least usually. So I would be at your but you got to be at your bus stop ready to go, because if there's a whole line and you're all going to the same place, you may not all fit on the first bus that comes. So then you're waiting another extra 20 minutes for that secondary bus. So you just really have to plan accordingly and kind of be extra early, especially for Hollywood Studios. I think it is, I would say it is the most important park to be there early for.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, that being said, I'm going to tell you my personal rope drop strategy, and then Kate will chime in on whether or not she agrees, I guess. And we'll see. So I'm kind of coming from the point, the perspective of my kids are currently 6 and 8, and this is what we would do if it were actually us, like real life in person. This is what we would do for rope drop. So if we are on property, so that means we're utilizing early entry, we're getting there extra early, getting in early, all those types of things. We would rope drop Slinky Dog Dash first. After that, we would probably hit Toy Story Mania and then Runaway Railway, because those are 3 of the top rides for my kids, and that would be our route, because logistically, those are fairly close together, and Slinky Dog is the big one to try to hit early so that the wait time is not as long.
Yeah. I would say I agree with Jackie on this. I would say, though, it depends on your mix of kids, what it is that you'd like to do for this. I think, I have a kid that doesn't love Slinky Dog because they're a little afraid of heights. So in that case, I would probably do, Toy Story Mania, Runaway Railway, kind of as a first, and then, something else after. But then you have something different listed for the off property, which is for my thrill seekers. Maybe we go towards Rocking Roller Coaster first or Tower of Terror. But that's what you recommend for off property is Rocking Roller Coaster, Tower of Terror. Basically go down Sunset Boulevard first. Yes. So opposite direction. So
yeah, because pretty much everyone for early park entry is going to Rise of the Resistance or Slinky Dog. Those are the two places they're going. So they are going to the back left side of the park, so to speak. So I highly suggest going down Sunset Boulevard on the right-hand side and doing Rock and Roller Coaster, Tower of Terror, in whichever order you decide for your particular group. But hitting those first and then working your way back around. Unfortunately, off-property guests, you're really going to be hit with those long wait times fairly early in the morning at Hollywood Studios. It's just the way it works, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's such a bummer. It's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is. So that's kind of in a nutshell, Hollywood Studios. Again, we're not listing out every single ride in order. We're not going through lightning lanes, all of that. We're just kind of giving you the quick rundown of what we suggest for each park. So that is kind of the Hollywood Studios plan, so to speak.
Yeah. Then we have done for Rope Drop there, we have done something too where we split up because it's such a crazy vast amount of e-tickets and whatnot. Yeah. So I have split up and taken my girls somewhere, and my husband took my son on the thrill rides that they didn't want to go on. Right. And I was okay not going on those rides because I've been on them a million times, but that was good to take the girls somewhere that they wanted to go instead. And so it was kind of a bummer to be split up as a family, but we also got a lot more done that way, which I don't think we have to do that for every park, but I really think this park, that's a good strategy if you have people that it's kind of a mixed party.
Yeah. And if you're someone that doesn't want to split up, but you want your thrill seekers to hit those rides at the beginning, remember that you can utilize things like child swap and things like that. So see the cast member at the entrance if you want to do child swap. Basically, what that is briefly is the cast member will scan your ticket for those of you who are waiting, so you don't have to wait in the standby queue twice through. So it gives that little bit of leniency that maybe you can take your younger kids that don't want to do Slinky Dog and do Toy Story Mania, and then the adult gets to go back and do Slinky Dog maybe while everyone else does Toy Story Mania, and maybe your little gets to do it twice. So there's different options that you can do. You just really have to look at proximity and what's close by if you've got a split party like that.
Yeah, and Amber brings up a good point in my chat that you can also do single rider on some of these attractions to have the option of that, which is a great one if you maybe only have one person who wants to go on something, go send them on the single rider, or if you don't mind being split up with your party, which you will be in single rider most of the time.
Yeah. So, and again, research, look at the rides, look at what you want to do, look at what's important to your group, and plan accordingly.
Yes.
All right. Are we ready for something completely different?
Yes.
Let's talk about Animal Kingdom. So again, something completely different. I think in contrast, this is one of the easiest parks to navigate because of just the way that it's set up in that kind of hub and spoke setup. Sorry, I said set up way too many times in that sentence. Sorry. It's that was redundant. Oh, well. So I think setup. It was great. It was great. Okay, so Animal Kingdom has truly a smaller amount of attractions in a larger space, so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of pick and choose where you want to go first. For this one, I would say arriving 30 minutes before your entry time is probably good, but again, you want to be through security at the gate. And I guess I should mention that Hollywood Studios does not let you tap in at the gates early before they open it for the public or for your time. Animal Kingdom does. So that's a nice thing about Animal Kingdom is you can tap in and then you're kind of staged in the front little area where they'll have cast members stopping you and telling you how far you can go, but they'll stage you inside of the tap styles, which I think is helpful at Animal Kingdom.
Yeah, definitely. All right.
So 30 minutes before. Kate, what do you do at Animal Kingdom?
Well, if I'm on property, which I usually am, I do pretty much what you laid out here, which is Flight of Passage first, because I'm not going to pay for the individual lightning lane for that ever. And then Navi River, and then Safari. That's exactly what we do every single time. So I definitely recommend that.
Yeah, it's just my foolproof way to do Animal Kingdom. I always tell people left to right, kind of, clockwise around Animal Kingdom is the best course of action, in my opinion. So yeah, Flight of Passage, Navi River. Now, if Navi River has too long of a line, because oftentimes people will get diverted from Flight of Passage and just go to Navi River because either they've got kiddos that are too short or don't want to ride Flight of Passage, or Flight of Passage gets very long very fast. So you really have to be in that front group of people going to Flight of Passage in order to make this work. The other thing worth mentioning is I put Safari third on that list because the Safari 99.9% of the time does not open with early entry.
Yeah. Well, but I do recommend doing it in the morning, not only for the lines, but also for the animals. They're very active in the morning before it gets really hot outside. So I love going in the morning to that one. That's because you can see most animals out and about and whatnot. Right. I will say that the last time we did it, we went on Flight of Passage, and I don't know if it was just the day we were there or whatnot, but the line was still really short for Flight of Passage afterwards. So we got to do it twice.
Amazing.
So, after you come out of Flight of Passage, if the line still looks really short, like that outer queue is not totally filled, jump back in it because that's the shortest it's going to be all day. So
yeah, and it's a great attraction. It is. It's really fun. But yeah, it's one that you really have to make a decision on. Are we rope dropping? Are we waiting for hours, or are we buying the lightning lane for that one? So you just,
or if it rains, you might get lucky and everybody might ditch out of the park.
Yeah,
and so if it's pouring out, you might want to check and see what the wait time is for that.
Yes, so true. Now, if you are someone who is off property, you're not staying at a Disney resort and you're coming to Animal Kingdom, I suggest going to the Safari first because it is going to open usually at Park Open or within the first 15 minutes of Park Open if everything goes to according to plan, right? There's no downtime or, the ride is operating. So I would definitely hit Safari first, and then I would go across the back of the park and go over to Expedition Everest next because you're going to have all of those early entry people still down in Pandora, and you want to let them kind of fizzle out before you attempt to see what the wait times are like over there.
Yeah, I probably would, at that point, I would just wait till late afternoon, when people start to leave the park, then the wait times usually start to drop over there. Not as much as they are in the morning, but it's possible. Sometimes you'll see lower waits near the end of the day for that. Yeah. But you don't want to do the Safari too late in the day because it does sometimes close early, closes at sunset usually. So.
Yes. Yeah, usually an hour or two before park close. Now, I will say if you're on the last safaris and it's close enough, you can sometimes get their dinner time feed if you get lucky. It's not guaranteed. Again, you're way more likely to get feeding happening in your morning safari, but you can occasionally time it to where you can get that dinner time feed if it's 4:30, 5 o'clock or so. So that can be really fun if you're someone who's like, well, we went on it this morning, let's go on it again, which is what I normally do.
Safari addict.
I just love the Safari. I think it's just it's so fun and it's so fascinating to see these animals, and you get something different every time, right? No matter no matter when you ride it, you're going to see different things. So
I just sometimes too, which is nice.
Yes, that's the best when you have those safari drivers that pull the more the lesser spoken about facts from their facts. Yes. From their guidebooks. I love that. So yes. But I think that's really the majority of Animal Kingdom. Again, it's got a lot less. They've got some really great shows and other things, so don't get me wrong, you definitely will spend time there, but for rope drop, that's kind of your best bets.
I also have a note from Christina that Animal Kingdom closed a whole bunch of stuff early that involved animals when she went in December, which is true. Those winter months, especially when it gets dark early, like the animals, they're going to bed. They're like, they're done.
Right.
Yeah.
So. And when it's planned like that, those operating hours are in your app. So I think a lot of people forget that you can see individual attraction operating hours when you click on them in your app. So if you're wondering what time the safari opens on the day that you're going to Animal Kingdom, click on it on the map in your app or through the tip board or through the list, however you like to find your attractions. Scroll down a little and it'll show you the operating hours for the day. So if there's something that you're wondering about or you just want to double check something, check that, because like the train to Rafiki's Planet Watch closes a little bit early, so there's lots of different things because they do have animals there.
Yeah. Alrighty, are we ready to move on to our next park?
Yeah, let's talk about Magic Kingdom.
Okay. Well, I would just want to say Magic Kingdom can feel a little bit overwhelming, I think, for a lot of people because there's so many different options. And I feel like that's kind of how I think even you and I are kind of like, we have different strategies for this one, whereas some of the rest of the Walt Disney World ones, I'd be like, yeah, that's definitely what I would do. So,
right.
So what do you think about Magic Kingdom, Jackie?
Yeah, I think the one thing I do want to mention is it is so important to have your priority list. So just like what Kate was saying, you really need to know what your top rides are, and that's really going to become your list for rope drop. And for your party, that may not be the big e-ticket attractions, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to not be going the same place that everyone else is going to. It's okay to go to a bunch of dark rides in Fantasyland during early entry if that's what your family and your kiddos and you want to do. That's okay. But the first 2 hours at Magic Kingdom are so important because that is really your best time to get through a ton of rides. That being said, Main Street will open about 75 minutes before park open time. So again, this is another one that you can scan in and be in the park to a certain extent before the park actually opens for people. So about 75 minutes. So I would arrive at the gate no less than 30 minutes before your time to be able to be let onto the rides, whether that's early entry or park open, depending on where you're staying. And that's like a minimum 30 minutes. That will give you like just enough time to get set up and figure out where you want to stand and all that kind of thing. But I suggest earlier, but I'd say at least 30 minutes. The one thing that is important to mention is that there is a virtual queue here that you want to get. So we're not talking lightning lanes, but I do just want to mention the virtual queue for Tiana's Bayou Adventure is still 7 a.m. So if you want to utilize that in the morning, you can do that, or they do have a 1 p.m. drop as well. So keep those things in mind. So you won't hear us talk much about Tiana's because we're going to be getting the virtual queue. If we're going to Magic Kingdom, we're going to be doing that virtual queue for that one. If you are on property, my suggestion for what my family would do, and this has actually changed recently because of Tron going to standby and not doing a virtual queue anymore, we will probably rope drop Space Mountain. A lot of people do Seven Dwarfs, but we'll probably do Space Mountain to then set ourselves up to be able to rope drop at Tron because it does not open with early park entry. It opens at park open time. So chances are good that we're going to be able to get through Space, get off of Space. If we're lucky, we can maybe do it twice or hit one other thing before we go queue up for Tron. But a lot of people during that early entry are just going to queue up and waiting for Tron to open. So we're probably hitting Space Mountain, Tron, and then swinging over into Fantasyland and hitting things like Pooh, Little Mermaid, and Haunted Mansion because that kind of hits my whole family's top rides.
Yeah, so mine's a little bit different because I'm looking at it from a perspective of I have more thrill seekers in my family. I have older kids. So our strategy would probably be Seven Dwarfs Mine Train because if we're on property, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which takes up a significant wait. But if you get there early enough, it can be like 20 minutes, maybe 30. And then head to Space Mountain. This will be probably right about the time the park is opening. So you might still be able to hit a pretty low wait time for Space Mountain and then head over to Big Thunder, which people tend to not get over to that side of the park quite, so it's a lot of bouncing around a little bit, but you can hit some of the big thrill rides real early. And then I would say, because Tron is no longer a virtual queue, I probably would lean towards doing it at night because it's such a cool experience at night. You might wait a little bit longer, but if you can hit it during the if you're not interested in doing the fireworks and stuff, you might be able to hit a little bit less of a wait if you wait while everybody else is going to the shows, it's not going to be low.
Right. Unfortunately. Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that is more for aesthetics of like the ride's really cool at night versus, you know, like lower wait times. So that's the impetus behind that strategy. Otherwise, I would do probably what Jackie's doing if Tron is like really, really important to you and you don't want to wait a long time for it.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like that's my son's ride now. He got to do it when we went on our last trip, and he was like, "Yep, that's what I want to do now." So, and again, my strategy, especially at Magic Kingdom, is I try to minimize walking because I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and yes, we still take a stroller because they're too little to walk all day at Magic Kingdom, especially. But if I don't have to push and haul all of our stuff from one side of the park to the other with a stroller, I try not to. So I try to keep it close, if at all possible, when it comes to that. Now, my off-property...
We don't have that because we just walk. We just walk a lot. But we do try to minimize walking for the rest of the day. Just like at Rope Drop, you just try to get stuff done. So
Right. Yeah, so true. So let's talk about off-property, because I think this is a park that is fairly different when it comes to off-property. So if you don't know the way that Magic Kingdom opens, for early park entry, you can utilize the majority of the rides in Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. So the entire left side of the park, if you're looking at your map, you know, from Main Street, the entire left side of the park does not open. So from Haunted Mansion all the way down through Pirates and around kind of doesn't open for early park entry. So if you are off property and you're doing your rope drop time at park open time, that's the side of the park you're going to want to go to because no one else is over there yet. So we would then do something like Big Thunder Mountain and then Haunted Mansion and then go up and do like Winnie the Pooh and things like that in Fantasyland. My kids are not huge Jungle Cruise fans and not huge Pirates fans. So unfortunately, those we leave those to the end of the day. I tried. They don't like getting wet, and Pirates, they don't enjoy the splashing. So I know. My husband and I are both very sad about it. We've tried, Kate. It's one of those things that like, that's one that I force them to go on. I'm like, nope, sorry, we're going on. Here's your jacket. Here's your poncho. We're going on. But like they both also like don't enjoy the fact that like when we get on Frozen, they sit down and the seat's wet. So it's just a thing, especially with my oldest. It's a sensory thing for him. Totally valid. I totally get it. But Pirates is good for you, so we tend to go on it anyway.
It usually doesn't have that long of a wait if you get in the right time of day too.
Yes. Yeah. So we do tend to circle back to that one later just because of my kiddos. We try to hit, like I said, our priority rides first. So that's why we kind of take that route instead.
Okay. So for me, for off property, we do Big Thunder first. We stand Big Thunder, and then Jungle Cruise because it just gets so long. And then Haunted Mansion after that is usually the top 3 that we go. Now, someone in my chat also mentioned that Big Thunder is going to be down for a year.
Yes.
Relatively soon. So just plan accordingly if you're going to go to Disney World in the next year. That Big Thunder is just kind of off of the options for that time.
Yeah. I'm glad we're on property so I don't have to rethink about my off-property strategy for my next trip because it'll be down when we go on my next trip. But we'll do the other side of the park. So
yeah,
we will
Fantasyland stuff.
Wave to it as we walk by and hopefully as we go on Tiana's because we haven't done that yet. So, and again, Tiana's virtual queue, 7 a.m., 1 p.m. Do that.
Right. Okay. So let's head on over to Epcot. We need to keep trucking along here because we got a lot to talk about. So do you want to chat about this one a little bit? Because you got a lot of notes here. I don't want to.
Yeah. So the thing about Epcot is it's very divisive when it comes to rope drop because it is the only park that you can enter from 2 locations. And that makes a massive difference for what you choose to go to first, in my opinion. And a lot of other people will tell you the same. Yeah. So it's very unique at Epcot because where you enter from can sway you one way or the other. If you're coming in the front gate, you're better off to hit Frozen, most likely, is what the majority of the people do. If you don't like Frozen, then, there's lots of other options in that front section of the park, which is now what? World Nature and World Adventure and World Discovery.
Always be Future World to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. But we gotta embrace the change and keep moving forward, Kate. Now, if you are entering from the World Showcase, which is the International Gateway, which means like Skyliner, or you're within like walking distance, so like Beach Club, Yacht Club, Boardwalk, those types of spaces, you're most likely going to head towards Remy in the France Pavilion. So it really depends on where you're staying and where you're coming in from and how you're getting into the park. If you're coming from a bus, you're coming from the monorail, you're coming from a car, if it's an Uber or Lyft or your own personal car, you're going to be entering from the front. If you're coming from your feet because you can walk from your resort or from the Skyliner, you're going to be looking at International Gateway. So keep those things in mind because the locations are very far apart. I would arrive a minimum of 30 minutes before your park time, early entry or park open, to set yourself up for the best case scenario when it comes to rope drop at Epcot.
Yeah. And there is a virtual queue still for Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, which is at 7 a.m. Or there's also a 1 p.m. drop that you have to be in the park for to get. The 7 a.m. one you can get wherever you're at. So I was looking at these, Jackie, and I was just like, I was trying to see if there would be like anything else I would do differently than this. And the problem is, I have a little bit of trauma from the last time I took my family to Epcot because we tried to do this on a really
hard morning.
It was awful. It was like everything was down or it was unusually busy. And so it was just like when we got to... So your recommendation here, which I agree with, if you're on property, you're going in the International Gateway, Remy, and then Frozen, Soarin', and then Mission Space or Test Track. Like, it looks like you're saying choose between the two, Remy or Frozen.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest. If you get really lucky and you're early through Remy, if you're coming in International Gateway, you might be able to make it to Frozen with like a 30-minute wait, which is not awful. That queue is really nice. There's lots to look at. It's indoors. So I would say 30 for Frozen is probably reasonable at rope drop because that's the lowest it's probably going to be all day unless it goes down or, something else happens. So yeah, but unfortunately you probably are going to have to choose.
Yeah. And I mean, the last time we went to Remy, it was like the line and they had filled the queue and it was still all the way back out to the beginning of the pavilion. And I was like, we are not waiting in that line. I'm sorry, children. Like, we are just going to move on.
Yeah.
I felt really bad, but I was just like, we can't. And then Frozen was down and then like everything else was down that day. It was bad. We ended up just having rope drop snacks in the sunshine seasons.
Yep. Hey,
how that day went.
You got to turn it around. Well, and I will be honest with my group, no matter where we're entering from, we're going to Frozen. My kids have been on Remy several times and it's not one of their favorite rides. It's a great attraction. They do not enjoy it. It has a lot of jump scares in it.
Little sensory things,
they don't like it. So, we don't do Remy as a family. Usually like my husband and I will go or, we'll figure that out kind of. I'm not sure what we're going to do this trip. We haven't talked about it yet. So we'll have to make a plan for that because that's one that like my kids have done it and I'm not going to, I always encourage my kids to go on once, sometimes usually twice on an attraction before they make their mind up about it. They've been on that one enough that they can make the decision about it. So we're going to go to Frozen and then we're going to go to Soarin'. We don't typically do Mission Space, so when Test Track opens, that would be our third, but it is still down for refurb right now as well.
I just don't do Mission Space, full stop. I hate that ride.
Yeah. I have not even tried it with my kids. I don't know how they would take it, and I don't know how to explain it to them without physically putting them on the ride. And like, nope. We're going to wait till you are significantly older.
So off property... Soarin' pretty much first, especially like if you're off property, you're not coming through the International Gateway at all. You're going to be in the front of the park. So right. Soarin' makes the most sense coming through there and then either Mission Space or Test Track. I lean towards Test Track, obviously, because I'm not a Mission Space fan. But
right.
Of course, like Test Track is still down though currently. Right?
Yes. So yeah, and we don't have a reopening date for that yet, unfortunately. So to be determined when that one will become an option again. Off property at Epcot during rope drop is really kind of tricky without having something like Test Track available as well.
Yeah.
So you're going to end up probably doing Soarin', Living with the Land, Nemo, Figment, kind of hitting that side of the park. And then honestly, if you're not doing if you're not doing Mission Space and Test Track is closed, you hopefully got a virtual queue for Guardians of the Galaxy. So maybe by the time you finish World Nature, then your queue will be ready for Guardians of the Galaxy and you can head across and go on that. But, that's going to take up the majority of your morning.
Yeah, and I would definitely say the only thing I would say different from the plan that you said for off property is if I'm doing Soarin', I'm also going to do Living with the Land as long as the line's not horrific, because you're already there, and who wants to trek all the way back to the land later in the day? So just even if it's the morning still. And honestly, there isn't that much you can do. Like we said, like you're like, we got Nemo, we have Figment, we have, Spaceship
Earth. Yes.
Those are like the things that you can do. Because at that point, by the time you're in, if you're off property, all of those big rides in the back, like just forget about it till later in the day. Like just don't even bother. They're going to be super full. And if you go back there, you're just going to wait in line for a long time. So you might as well stick around in the front of the park, get everything done before you transition to World Showcase.
Yeah. And if you are off property and you're not using lightning lanes and you want to do Frozen or Remy, you're going to have to pick one. And I would suggest getting in line for it at like 8:40, 8:45, because usually park closes 9 o'clock and fireworks are 9 o'clock at Epcot. So I would do it like last thing right before fireworks. Or if you don't care about fireworks, get in line at 8:59 and do it then.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else here before we transition? We hop across the country?
I think that's it. I think we covered it all in a nutshell, in a very whirlwind explanation of all of that. And again, if you want lightning lane stuff, go back to episode 63 when it comes to lightning lanes and multipass, because I get that makes a big difference, right, when it comes to some of these rides. Because if you're someone who is going to Epcot, since we just did that park, and you're using lightning lanes and you get a Remy lightning lane, well, then that makes your decision easy. You rope drop Frozen and go from there. So, that can really affect what you do for sure.
Yeah. I think sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and recognize you might not get to everything, and especially because we don't have the old Genie Plus system where you could kind of like finagle your way into all the things in the course of the day. Now we don't have that. So unless you really want to wait for a really long time, you probably aren't going to get to everything. Yeah. It's just probably not going to happen. And that's okay.
Yeah. Or if you have someone that knows a lot about lightning lanes and can help you do lightning lanes at the
Jackie's
parks.
pointing to herself.
I'm really good at that. So, I recently just helped someone in Pocket Fam, and we did like 8 rides at Magic Kingdom and 6 rides at Hollywood Studios all in one day using MultiPass. So it's just you have to do a lot of research on it, and you have to know what you're doing, unfortunately. So if you don't have the time or the brain capacity to do that, send me a message and I will help you figure out what you need to do.
Jackie is great at it, so she is worth every penny. No. That being said, let's transition over to Disneyland just in the interest of time. We'll keep on moving here. So Disneyland, same like Disney World, you do want to arrive early before the park opening time. So I usually say arrive 30 to 45 minutes before the park is scheduled to open. If you know you're going toward like during the holidays or spring break time and it's going to be really busy, make sure you allow some extra time to get through security, because security can be rather slow there, depending on which entrance you're going in and how many people there are that day. We are going to talk about lightning lanes a little bit because it is more economical. It's better to use them in Disneyland because they have the old like Genie Plus system. Of course, it's called Lightning Lane Multipass in Disneyland now, but it essentially functions the same as Genie Plus did. So you can actually get on a lot of rides in the day, and you can also park hop to the other park and use it there as well. So it's a great system. I think it's worth the money, quite honestly. If you don't go to Disneyland very often, for locals and whatnot, it's probably not worth it because you just know what you're doing. But So that being said, if I was using a Lightning Lane multipass and purchasing that, here's kind of what the day would look like. So it's 7 a.m. No matter where you're at. If there's a virtual queue available for something, get your virtual queue. Yes. And I say that because like they're just they kind of move around. Right now there is a Haunted Mansion virtual queue because the queue is under construction for the Haunted Mansion. So if you want to get on the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay, you need to get a virtual queue for that. And also Tiana's is opening up here in just a matter of weeks. I know that there is a Magic Key Holder virtual queue that's going to be happening, and I assume then there will also be a virtual queue most likely when it opens for everybody else. So, you know, depending on when you listen to this episode, just check to see in the app if there's a virtual queue for something. And at 7 a.m., no matter where you're at, you can get that. So even if you're at a hotel or whatever, you can get the virtual queue. Yes. That being said, you can't book anything with the multipass. You have to like buy the multipass once you get in the park. So like you get at the gate and the first thing you do is you have to pull out your phone and like book your first thing for the day. And that's just unfortunately kind of how it is. You can't do it ahead of time. You can't do it at 7 a.m. You can't do it at midnight like Walt Disney World and all the things used to be. So as soon as you get in the park, book your first multi-pass Lightning Lane and any single pass Lightning Lanes you want to buy for the day, which would be Rise of the Resistance for Disneyland in particular. And then I will just mention, we've done a whole episode on this, so I'm not going to get in the weeds here, but in the order of booking attractions, book Space Mountain first, and then after that, Indiana Jones, and then so on and so forth. We have a whole list in an episode about that, so I won't get into that. But those are the ones that I would recommend to book first if you're interested in either of those, because they go pretty quickly.
And remember that Disneyland's multi-pass system is one ride at a time still. So it's not like Disney World's where you can get the 3 at a time and hold them that way. It is one ride at a time. So the earlier times you get, the better. The quicker you can tap in, the quicker you can book your next one. So just remember that difference, or I guess the old way when it comes to Lightning Lanes.
Yeah. I do have a question in my chat from Amber. Might I know which security line at Disneyland opens earliest or get to be first at the turnstile? I believe that they open the plaza entrances all at the same time. I think they coordinate the time that they do that. So it really depends. I would probably say that Harbor Boulevard entrance is going to be closest to the gates to get in into the turnstile. So if you want to be like the earliest, I think that's probably your best bet, because otherwise you're going to have to walk from a really far distance. So but as to like the exact time they open that, I don't know. I think sometimes it varies per day. And so I would probably ask somebody there the night before if they know what time I might be opening the next morning. That's probably what I would do. Okay. So if you're using the Lightning Lane multipass, here's kind of what I would probably do at Rope Drop. And I did have a little bit more rides listed because in Disneyland everything's so close together. You can actually move through quite a bit in your like Rope Drop hour and a half, 2 hours before the crowds really come in. So I would recommend going to Fantasyland and hitting the rides that are not included in Lightning Lanes, which are quite a few in this park. So I would do Alice in Wonderland, Dumbo, Snow White's Enchanted Wish, King Arthur Carousel if you want to, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and either Casey Jr. Circus Train or Storybook Land Canal Boats. You wouldn't have time for both in that kind of rope drop time, but you could go from one to the other if you really want to do both, but they kind of wind around each other in the same area, so you're kind of seeing the same thing. So that's up to you if you want to do both. My recommendation would probably do Casey Jr. Circus Train and come back in the evening to do Storybook Land Canal Boats right at like golden hour or blue hour. It's really beautiful quite then because they turn on all the lights in it and whatnot. So,
yeah. And again, if you're using your Lightning Lanes, don't book a Lightning Lane for like the first hour that the park is open, because that's going to take up all of your rope drop time. So leave yourself a buffer of about an hour and a half, and then start using your Lightning Lanes and flying through those rides after that, because otherwise you're going to run out of time to do the Fantasyland rides because they are not included on your Lightning Lane.
Right. And you can book something as a Lightning Lane, and then you can go in and modify it and push the time back if you need to. So like just start getting the timer going on that so that you can book another one sooner. So if you don't know how to modify, again, go back to that episode at 63. We talk all about how to do that. Yes. All right. So let's say you don't want to get multipass. You don't want to spend the money. You're not interested. You're like, we go a lot. I don't want to do that. So here's your rope drop strategy for that. Again, still get your virtual queue in the morning because you don't pay extra for that, 7 a.m. And as soon as you enter the park, if you want to do the single pass lightning lane for Rise, you could still get that if you wanted to, even if you're not going to do the multi-pass stuff. But I'm going to offer 2 different options depending on your age of kiddos, because Disneyland has a tremendous amount of attractions. And so the way you go really depends on who is interested in what. So here's the strategy if you have a lot of non-thrill seekers, younger kids, or a mixed party, people who aren't interested in really big rides. I would do Fantasyland first. Again, these are slow loading attractions that have really long waits later in the day just because they're slow loading attractions. So Alice in Wonderland, Dumbo, Snow White's Enchanted Wish. You could throw in the Matterhorn at this point, especially because it's right there. So it's really easy to just walk over and do it. And It does get really long the rest of the day. So if you want to do Matterhorn, do it in the morning. King Arthur Carousel, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and again, Casey Jr. Circus Train or Storybook Land Canal Boats. And if time, you could pop on over to It's a Small World, but basically hit everything in Fantasyland. The ones that you want to go on, that's my strategy for that. If you have thrill seekers and older kids, here's what I would recommend: is you start with Space Mountain, then New Matterhorn, then Indiana Jones if it's open. Don't ever rope drop Indiana Jones because it is like Rise of the Resistance. It's very slow to open sometimes. It goes down a lot. Sleepy. It needs some love to wake up some mornings. So it's a bad strategy to rope drop it because you're going to get there. There's going to be a line of cast members and you're like, oh, great. So Space Mountain, Matterhorn, then Indiana Jones if it's open, Big Thunder, and then I would do Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, assuming it's not a virtual queue. So that will depend on, what's going on with Haunted Mansion at that point, and then Star Tours after that. So really hitting a lot of the big thrill rides. And I do have most of the people in Disneyland who are rope dropping are headed to Rise of Resistance. That's the majority of people. So if you do these ones, your lines are going to be pretty low until probably around 11 o'clock, 11:30 is when a lot of the crowds start to come in. And it's actually even a little bit later. That's more true, I'd say, for Disney World. Disneyland, really don't see big crowds coming in until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30, because that's when people start getting off of work and coming into the park. So, and Shannon's saying I rope drop Starbucks, which I don't recommend. But if that's you do for your trip,
right? If that's what you got to do to get through the morning, I guess. Again,
if you get there early, you could still go to Starbucks before. So
that's what I was just gonna say. Reminder that Main Street on both coasts opens before the park opens. So if you need to grab your coffee and all of that, give yourself plenty of time because there will be a lot of other people doing that. But you can always plan accordingly and give yourself extra time.
Yeah. But I'd say rope drop is so critical for Disneyland in particular. I mean, it is for Disney World too, but for Disneyland, it is because of all those locals that come into the park, and you're going to see way bigger crowds in the afternoons and evenings and nighttime than you are in the morning. So if you could get most of your day done in the morning, then you can just enjoy. You could go take a break and come back because the Disneyland hours are often open till 11 or midnight. It's there's a lot of hours there. So doing things in the morning, then taking a nice break is definitely recommended. Not that I do. I just go rope drop to fireworks and then some. So I just don't sleep when I'm at Disneyland. That being said, let's hop on over to California Adventure. Again, same advice. Arrive 30 to 45 minutes before this park is scheduled to open. More time through security if you need it. If you have the Lightning Lane multi-pass, once you're in the park, I would book, this is a tricky one. So I would say if you really want to go on Radiator Springs Racers and you don't want to have a long wait and you don't want to use the single rider line, you could get the single pass Lightning Lane. If it's top of your priority list and you have the budget for it, this is when you could book that. I don't recommend rope dropping this ever. Again, it's another ride that goes down a lot in the morning or doesn't come up for a while, and so people will just automatically get diverted away from it pretty quickly. And or it will break down pretty early in the morning. So, and everybody goes there to Radiator Springs Race. There's like a massive crowd of people that go there in the morning. So I always say go where people are not going. That's just pivot, right?
Yeah.
And my strategy usually for Radiator Springs racers, honestly, with the system we have now is if you're not going to watch World of Color, or there's 2 shows for World of Color, try to go to the first World of Color show. And then right before the park closes, that's when you get in line for Radiator Springs racers, because then there's no more lightning lanes coming in that's extending your wait time. Otherwise, you can use the single rider line if that works for your family. Most of the time, I wouldn't do it in like the peak hours of the day. So I do it, early morning or afternoon. But single rider line is the way to go to try to not wait too long on that. The way I judge the single rider line is if I walk into it and the line is past the overhead bridge, then I walk back out and I come back later because that's too long. It's going to take a while. So that's the way I look at it. Okay, so with lightning lanes, I would make sure you book your first multi-pass lightning lane when you get in the park, just like Disneyland. And I would book them in this order: Guardians Mission Breakout, then Web Slingers, and then Toy Story Midway Mania maybe after that. So that would be the order that I would do. Again, episode 63 if you want all the details on that. And also don't forget to get your World of Color virtual queue at noon. A lot of people don't even know that that's like a thing, but it's free. It's in your app. If you want to see World of Color when right before noon, make sure you have your app open. You've selected your party and whatnot for the virtual queue area, and then just tap that button and get a really good virtual queue for World of Color. So don't forget to do that. Anyway, so I'm going really fast, but we have a lot to cover. So we're just like fast forward here. So my rope drop strategy then, if I was doing Lightning Lane, I would actually do the things that people are probably not going to. So I would do Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, which would be 0 weight, and Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters. Again, maybe Radiator Springs single rider if you're not going to get that Lightning Lane. But that's kind of where I would head. And then I'd head over to Pixar Pal Around, Little Mermaid, like the things that are not on your Lightning Lane list. I would hit all of those first.
Now, DCA has a lot more that is included in their lightning lanes than Disneyland. So Disneyland is one that you really have to make sure you look at what is not included. Yeah. DCA is not as big of a list that you have to worry about when it comes to their lightning lanes.
Exactly. So I'd say after you do Mater's and Luigi's and Radiator Springs, you probably at that point are starting your lightning lanes and working through them. Right. And the rest you can sprinkle in wherever you have time. So let's say you're not going to do like lightning lane multi-pass. Which way are you going to go? I didn't do 2 different routes for this one just because there's a lot less attractions than Disneyland. So this is just my general recommendations. I would visit the attractions in this order: Web Slingers first, then Soarin', Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters. At this point, that's probably you're well past rope drop at that point. So that's kind of where I'd go. And then maybe Radiator Springs, single rider at that point, because you're already in that area. But that's pretty much it. The other one you could do, and a lot of people I've seen recommend this, is going to Toy Story Midway Mania first and kind of hitting the things that are way on the far side of the park because there's just not that many people over there yet. Right. So if you would like to do that, then I would do like Toy Story Midway Mania, do any of the other smaller attractions that you want to do over there so you're not walking there twice in a day. It's really far. Right. Well, not by Walt Disney World standards, by Disneyland standards, it's really far. And then maybe go back and go like Soarin', like that's probably the route I would take if you were going to go there. I see Joey in my chat saying I go for Guardians first, then Web Slingers or Racers, single rider. And yeah, I think Web Slingers or Guardians. I think a lot of people rope drop Guardians. So it's like, it depends, which way you want to go. And if you're like my family, most of my kids don't want to go on that attraction. So we tend to not prioritize it. So so that's in a nutshell DCA. That's probably how I would do it. But there's honestly, you could kind of mix up a few of those and still be fine. Some of them are pretty much on the same level. So
Yeah. And again, just like we always say for Disney World, you hear us talk about it. The same thing applies, especially for somewhere like DCA. You have to make that priority list, right? So if Guardians is your top priority because you've got, your kiddos want to do it, then that's where you're going to head first anyway. So follow what Kate said, but also pick and choose based on what your priority list is for your group.
Right. I definitely think that's the case. Like, you might not want to do Web Slingers, but you do want to Guardians of the Galaxy, or you don't want to go on Maters. Like, that doesn't appeal to you. Like, that don't, just like eliminate that one and save yourself some time and go to something you do love. Yeah. Yes. Or do something you love twice. Because you can always do something you love twice. There's no rule against that.
Like the safari at Animal Kingdom.
Exactly.
So true. Okay. Are we ready to take a plane over to Europe and talk a little bit about Disneyland Paris? Yes, across the pond. So Kate has been to Disneyland Paris, and I was fortunate enough that she asked me to help her in planning her trip over there. So we both have a decent amount of knowledge. Mine is more, what I have researched and things, and Kate has actually been. So when we feel like it's relevant, we like to include Disneyland Paris in our conversation, because we do have some of our listeners that are hoping to get there, interested in getting there, planning to go. So we want to try to give you guys some info when we can.
Yes. So I just went to Disneyland Paris last year, about a year ago now. And I did go with all of my family. So this is information based on my experience as a mom going with elementary and up age kids. So I will say just a couple of notes before I dive into strategy. I will say there's some really great play and exploration areas in Disneyland Paris if your party wants to split up or use ride or switch for some of the big rides. So they have like a pirate playship area in Adventureland. Of course, the tree house is there as well. They have Alice's Labyrinth, which is like a big maze. And then the Nautilus walkthrough in Discoveryland. So it's like in almost every land, there's something you can do with littles if you're just waiting, which is really nice, quite honestly. Yeah. I wish more of the Disney parks had that. Something to do that's just kind of walk through. I also say that we were really surprised when we were there that Fantasyland closes early in this park, usually about 60 to 90 minutes before fireworks, depending. So you can always check your app or ask somebody the day of when Fantasyland is closing. But literally, like, all the back of the park just closes. And so everybody gets shuffled into Main Street. And then the show doesn't start until park close. So everybody that's in the park is on Main Street USA at the same time.
Hanging out and waiting.
And there's like no crowd control. None. Like, be very careful. I'm going to say this just as a safety thing. I was lucky enough to have a friend of mine that was there kind of at the same time and warned me that there was no crowd control like there is in Disney World and Disneyland.
Yeah.
So after the show is over, like, there was like crush of crowds. And so we held really tight to our kids' hands so we wouldn't be separated. But it was something. So if you're like claustrophobic, if you have a fear of crowds like that, really try and stay on the fringes and just linger until everybody's exited, because it is not them telling people to go places. It's everybody just crammed in together, and it's a little scary. So be safe.
Yes.
I also mentioned that Rider Switch works differently at Disneyland Paris than it does in the US parks. So this is what they say. They say, while the first parent guardian rides the attraction, the second parent or guardian waits outside with the children. At the exit, the first parent or guardian can collect a rider switch pass and hand it to the second. And the first parent then takes over watching the children while the second can go onto the attraction and board without waiting. But they do say, ask a cast member at the attraction entrance for how it works, because they don't always work the exact same way depending on which attraction it is. And it's only available for the bigger e-ticket attractions, which is similar to the US parks. But there's also only a max of 2 people per the second ride as well. So, okay. So that's all of my little just like notes about Disneyland Paris, of things that I learned by going.
Yeah.
So you don't make my mistakes. But so if you have younger kids or non-thrill seekers, this is my rope drop strategy. I'm not going to even talk about Premier Pass there. It's really expensive. So I just said I can't afford that. So if you're like me, this is what you could do. I would start out with Peter Pan's Flight, which, just like the US parks, it has quite a line to it. But if you hit it early in the morning, it can be lesser. Dumbo the Flying Elephant, Pinocchio. I'm just going to say I'm not going to pronounce the It's a
Oh,
French
come
name. So we're
on,
just gonna
Kate.
go.
She
Snow
very
White.
nicely wrote out the French names for all of these attractions on our notes.
That's because I copied them from the ones that you made like a really great touring plan for me and my family. So I just copy and pasted.
Perfect.
But anyway, Pinocchio. So Peter Pan, Dumbo, Pinocchio, Snow White. It's a Small World. And then at that point, you're probably past rope drop time. But I would stay in Fantasyland at that point and just kind of get everything there. So Casey Jr., Storybook Land Canal Boats, their version of that, the Carousel, and Mad Hatter's teacups as well. So then there's also the Labyrinth and Sleeping Beauty's Gallery, the Dragon's Lair, just basically everything there in Fantasyland. I would recommend just getting it done, especially because it closes early at night and you don't want to risk not seeing anything there.
Well, and I think that park we found, at least in the research, that it made sense. It didn't make sense to do a lot of cross park, right? With there, it really makes sense to focus on one area, get that done, and then move on to the next area, depending on what your party is doing. And they really, truly don't, from what we've found, they don't have a lot of people that use their premier passes.
No.
So the lines move fairly evenly, and
Like
you don't
they
have
weren't designed to.
right. You don't have a lot of stopping and starting when it comes to the standby queues. So that is something to note if you're like borderline, like, should I get in line? Should I not? It's like almost too long. Well, knowing that the line is moving, I feel like can be very helpful. So that more often you're going to find that at Disneyland Paris.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so what if you have older kids or thrill seekers or just adults? Here's what I would recommend is absolutely Big Thunder Mountain first.
Yes.
And twice if you can. It's the best ride. It's the best ride in the park. It's the best ride in every version of Big Thunder that ever has existed. It is amazing. So you do not want to miss Big Thunder. Do it first. It gets really crowded later. Yeah. Then Phantom Manor, which is not that far from Big Thunder. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, which is a roller coaster, not like the one in Disneyland, so don't be thinking it's the same as Indiana Jones here. No. It's an outdoor roller coaster.
Yes.
And then Pirates of the Caribbean, and then I would pop over to do Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain in Discoveryland and Star Tours. So like the thrill-seeking ones, I think that's probably the order that I would do them for those. Okay, so let's move on to Walt Disney Studios Park, which is going to become Disney Adventure World in 2026.
Oh, it needs such a facelift. I'm so excited that they're putting some time and focus into helping this park. Yes. It needs it. It needs it.
I will note also that some Avengers Campus attractions might close early due to nighttime shows. So that is something also that I learned from experience. So if you're... here's the order that I would recommend rope dropping for this one. Crush's Coaster is first. That line is brutal and long. My kids were like giving up. They wanted to leave. They did not want to do that line, and it's long. So do that one first if you can. Rope drop that to try to get it out of the way. And then Spider-Man Web Adventure, which is like Web Slingers, their version of that. And then Twilight Zone Tower of Terror and Avengers Assemble Flight Force. So if you don't have thrill seekers, though, I would skip Crush's Coaster because it's more like Guardians of the Galaxy. If you don't know what it's like, it's kind of that same ride vehicle that kind of turns a coaster that turns as you're
Cosmic
going
Rewind. Through. Guardians of the Galaxy. Cosmic Rewind.
Cosmic Rewind. Thank you.
Yep.
And so I would skip Crush's Coaster. I'd probably do Spider-Man Web Adventure and then Ratatouille The Adventure. And then RC Racer might be the next one I do if I didn't have thrill seekers with me. But honestly, like there's not that much else in that park that's worth doing. There's like Slinky Dog Zigzag Spin. You could do the Toy Soldier Parachute Drop. I do not recommend the Cars Road Trip. It's a really long walk to where it opens up. And it's like, you're getting in a tram and you're going by some random road signs. And then there's kind of this thing that reminds me of the Backlot tour back in the day.
Mm-hmm. It's like a really lame version of the old Backlot tour from Hollywood Studios.
I think I have like video of me being like, what is this? that I've like, never posted anywhere, but I was like, this is terrible. So don't really recommend. Honestly, I would not spend a lot of time in this park outside of Avengers Campus and, Ratatouille, like that, those areas that are the newer areas. But hopefully that will change when they open up Frozen Land and all the things. So they're going to have a lot of amazing things that I think are going to make that park worthwhile.
Yeah. And again, it's hard because if you're someone that's coming from the US parks and you've done some of these similar attractions, you really don't need a ton of time in this park because, like you said, their Spider-Man Web Adventure is almost identical to Web Slingers. Their Tower of Terror is a little bit different, but
it's like the one in Disneyland. It's almost identical except for a few small things. It's not that different. Well, I mean, Disneyland now doesn't have Tower of Terror, but I'm saying the ride vehicle, I guess. The ride experience is the same.
Yeah. Ratatouille is identical, the exact same. Don't be fooled. Their Slinky Dog is not as good as the Hollywood Studios Slinky Dog.
So it goes in a circle.
Yeah.
It's not a roller coaster. It was honestly very sad to walk into that park. It was very disappointing. I was like, this clearly was put together very kind of last minute with like off the shelf things that they put overlays on. And I'm glad that they're trying to fix it now because they realized what they did.
Yes.
But
until
honestly,
then,
I wouldn't. But I will say, this is not a ride or rope drop strategy, but the Pim's Kitchen restaurant is one of the best Disney restaurants I've ever eaten at in my entire life. It's a buffet, but like buffet of like gourmet food. So I 100% recommend that restaurant if you can get reservations there. Definitely worth it.
Okay, there you go. Okay. Is that all that we have for Disneyland Paris? Okay.
I got to stop talking. So
no, that was perfect. Again, like we said at the beginning, I looked at Kate's notes and I was like, whoa, girl, that's a lot.
I'm sorry. But I did skip over a lot of it.
You did great. It was perfect. And it's hard, right? Because like we talked about at the beginning, there are so many different little paths that you can take. And it's so hard without getting details from you and knowing who is in your party and what kind of rides you want to do and where you want to go. And do you have dining reservations? Do you have this? Like, it's just, there's so many other pieces to the puzzle before you can even get to rope drop that we just wanted to at least kind of vaguely outline what we typically do to give you guys a starting point to know like, oh, okay, these 3 or 4 rides are worth the first part of my day for rope drop.
Yeah. And we do have some resources for this if you're like, I need a visual aid to help me remember what it is you talked about. And we are currently making sure that they're completely updated. So, you know, by the time this airs, they will be updated. Yes. But if you go to disneysisteron.com/momstreetusa, you can find all of our resources there. Also planning checklist and all the things. So that is a great place to go if you want kind of a visual of like, what is the list again of things that I should book for lightning lanes or things that I should do for the order of the rides for the day. If you just kind of want to like, tell me what to do so I don't have to think about it, we have those resources for you there.
Yes. And you'll find them under, I think we have named them the like 1 day strategy guide. So if you have 1 day in that park, this is your list. And again, like Kate said, we have without lightning lane, with lightning lane to give you hopefully the most complete snapshot to the best of our ability. And then you just pick and choose from there, right? If there's something on that list that you're like, we don't want to do that, then don't do it. It's your vacation.
Cross it off.
You get to pick and choose what you want to do. You get to decide. So that's just the best information that we can give you to make it make sense, because it's complicated. It is. Always complicated, no matter what.
But we're here to help you make it less complicated. So if you get hung up on something and you don't know what to do, you can always email us at momstreetusa@gmail.com or contact us on any social media platform, and we'll be here for you to help you if you need it. And of course, if you need a little extra help because you're just overwhelmed with planning, Jackie does some great consultation for trips and planning for lightning lanes and whatnot. So she's always available for that.
It's true. I am. All right.
Should we move on?
Yes. Okay. Our Ask the Moms tonight is very timely. So every podcast episode, we end with our Ask the Moms question, where we take a question from our Mom Street community and answer it. And we decided the question tonight because we knew that it was a hot topic that people were going to want to talk about, because this week that we are recording this episode is when Disney announced the new Lightning Lane Premier Pass. So we're just going to talk about basically what is the new Lightning Lane Premier Pass and is it worth the cost? Because we feel like that's something that a lot of people are curious about. So I'm going to give you just a very brief overview, and I'll be honest, we don't have all of the details yet from Disney. We have just kind of the overview, and we'll be able to see more in a few weeks when this actually becomes a real thing that you can do. But right now, this is what we know. So this is the new Premier Pass, and it includes all the rides on the current Lightning Lane systems, including all of the big e-ticket rides that are currently either single pass or, what was formerly known as individual Lightning Lane. The Premier Pass gives you one entry per ride per day. So no re-rides, just one entry per ride per day. And there is no return time needed. So gone are the days that you have to, if you choose to do the Premier Pass, that you have to go on your app and book your hour return window. With the Premier Pass, you don't have to do that. It is just you can go whenever you choose. And as long as the ride is operating, you can go and scan through the Lightning Lane once per ride. So that's kind of the overall overview as it applies to both Disney World and Disneyland, because it is going to be something that you can do at both of those parks. Now, let's talk about specifics for each park, because the pass overall functions the same, but it has some little differences that I just want to point out for those of you that may be visiting one coast or the other. So Disney World, this pass debuts October 30th, 2024. So literally in like 2 weeks, it premieres. Currently, it is only available to guests at Disney, Deluxe Resorts, and DVC. So it is not available to the general population, general public. Just those eligible people are currently able to do that when it comes to their trip.
They did say also that there's a limited amount available per day. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many that is, but it's not unlimited for all the guests that are in the hotels. It's limited.
Yes. So I do just want to run down this list because I know there's always questions on which hotels are included. Does it include this? Does it include that? So for this one, I literally copied and pasted this straight from Disney. So the eligible resorts are Animal Kingdom Lodge, Beach Club, Boardwalk, Contemporary, Grand Floridian, Polynesian Village, Wilderness Lodge, and Yacht Club, and also the Disney Deluxe Villa Resorts, so Bay Lake Tower, Boulder Ridge Villas at Wilderness Lodge, the cabins at Fort Wilderness, so that's only for the Disney Vacation Club cabins, though, so you have to be in a DVC cabin for that. Copper Creek Villas and cabins at Wilderness Lodge, the Animal Kingdom Villas at Jambo and Kidani, Beach Club Villas, the Boardwalk Villas, Old Key West Resort, Polynesian Villas and Bungalows, Saratoga Springs. That all jumbled out of my mouth. The Riviera Resort and the villas at the Grand Floridian. Notably, this also does include the Swan Reserve, the Dolphin, and Shades of Green. So that whole list.
That's so weird that those are included.
So those are also included for deluxe hours when it comes to that.
But
so
it's weird.
It is weird. It is a little weird, but I'm sure. I mean, honestly, the best use of this is to get a really good rate at the Swan or Dolphin. Yeah. Use points or get a discount or, there's lots of sales that you can get because it's Marriott owned, and then use this pass and let it be the difference that you saved, right? Does that make sense? In your budget, that would be my suggestion. If you're someone that really wants to use the pass, but doesn't want to pay the extra amount over top of that.
Yep.
So at Disney World, it can be purchased 7 days ahead of your check-in date, and you can purchase it for up to 14 days at a time. So same as your multi-pass currently functions. So, and the price point. Now, Disney released a range of prices. The range of prices that they said are $129 to $449, and that is per person, per park, per day. Now, the rumored prices, and I say rumored because these prices have been a lot of places online, but I have yet to see them directly from Disney. I always hesitate. We, as Mom Street, always hesitate to give you information that we can't find directly from the Disney website. But I do want to just give you these ranges because they have been posted a lot of places, but I do want to make sure you understand that these are the rumored costs for the park breakdown at Disney World. So not directly from Disney that I have seen yet. Animal Kingdom is going to range from $129 to $199 per person per park per day. Epcot is $169 to $249. Hollywood Studios is $269 to $349. And Magic Kingdom is $329 to $449.
I just did the math, and if I wanted to do that, this is not including park tickets.
Correct.
For my family of 5, just for one day at Magic Kingdom would be $2,200, $2,245
at the low end. I'm assuming did you do the low end?
That's the high end.
That's the high end. Okay,
that's at $449.
Okay,
$2,245 for my family of 5, not including tickets or food or souvenirs.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, the Disney World option does not park hop. So you cannot take it with you if you park hop. It is per park per day. So if you want to park hop on a day, I wouldn't buy the pass on that day.
Like, what if you did? Oh my gosh. So
no. And this does include your ride photo pass. So here you go. Here's your ride photos. Not all your photos, your ride photos.
So if I let's say I wanted to park hop with my family of 5 from Magic Kingdom to Epcot, on the high end, $3,490 for the day.
On top of
tickets and food and your
resort stay.
I'm sure that there's people out there that have that kind of money that don't care.
Right? Oh, absolutely. Nope. Okay, I'm just going to keep pushing through because Let's talk about Disneyland. So Disneyland is getting their own version of the Lightning Lane Premier Pass. Theirs will debut October 23rd, 2024. So again, we're looking at less time there, about a week out from that. Their pass is going to be available to all guests with park reservations. So no resort stays needed, which makes sense because we've talked about Disneyland just doesn't have the resorts that Disney World has, all that type of thing. This can be purchased 2 days prior to your reservation day. So they have to be able to see that valid reservation has already been in your account, and then you can purchase it 2 days out from there. Their price range is much smaller for several reasons. So it is anywhere from $300 to $400 per person per day. However, their pass you can use to park hop. So it is eligible and applicable for both parks when you buy it at Disneyland, which is not surprising because that's been the way that Disneyland's passes have worked for a while now. Again, rumors are that for the remaining days in 2024, it is $400 a day for that Disneyland pass.
Which makes sense because we're in the holiday quarter.
Yes, exactly. So. Again, that is a rumor. Haven't seen it confirmed by Disney, haven't seen it on the Disney app yet, but that's what the interwebs are telling us from fairly reliable Disney news sources. That being said, it will range anywhere from $300 to $400 per day for 2025. I would anticipate busier times, you're going to be looking at $400. On the slower times, you're going to be looking closer to $300 when it comes to that. It does include your unlimited photo pass downloads at Disneyland. You get all of your photos included, not just ride photos. So Disneyland says, "Oh, sure, we can get you all of your photos. Here you go."
Multi-pass has that too.
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's how Disneyland operates.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But just a note that I did find that I wanted to make sure we put this in our episode is that for this year, for 2024, for Haunted Mansion Holiday, it is not eligible on the Premier Pass. You still have to do the virtual queue.
This is true, by the way, if you have even Club 33 passes, because when you go to Club 33, they give you some ride vouchers with your visit. And I went with a friend who had some, and they turned us away. They're like, "No, sorry, you have to have a virtual queue." And I was like, wow, if Club 33 can't get in,
right?
It's that's really something. So
yes. So that is, again, for this holiday season 2024, while they do that, the rest of the refurb and construction of the queue area there. Don't know beyond that what they will do. So again, if you're someone that is listening to us and is planning to go February of 2025, you're going to have to look at what Haunted Mansion is doing while you're there. So
they're getting closer to reopening it, though. I'm seeing like a lot of the walls are starting to come down. A lot of things are getting progressing and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's getting there. So I'm hoping 2025 opens back up.
Yeah. So all of that factual information being said, is it worth it?
Well,
crickets.
I think our good friend Kirk from Walrus Carp, he kind of did a little bit of a breakdown between the VIP tours and this, and the cost was like somewhat negligible between them. So much so that if you were going to go this route, it would be better to do a VIP tour because there's so many more things included with that, and not the least of which being like your personal tour guide, but also access to a lot of things and benefits and perks and merch and all kinds of things that you don't get outside of that. So if I was somebody who had money to spend on something like this, I would personally go VIP tour before I did this myself.
Yeah. I go back and forth on, and again, this is all very hypothetical in the if I had the funds and money that I wanted to spend on this, which will literally never happen in my life. And I'm okay with that.
Win the lottery, maybe. I don't know.
No, still no. Still not money for Premier Pass.
Still, even if I won the lottery, I don't think I would pay it. I think I would. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think I would look to, if I knew I had a larger budget and I was going to be taking my family, I would just look for the cheapest room possible to stay so that I could offset my budget and pay for this. But again, I wouldn't use it at every park. Not only that, like Magic Kingdom, I probably would consider using it because I think it's worth it because there's a ton of attractions at that park.
Hollywood Studios would be the
Hollywood Studios would probably be the other one, but like Animal Kingdom and Epcot, again, that's why they're the lowest level when it comes to that breakdown, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would use it there. I don't think it makes sense. I think I can get by using single pass or multi-pass and pay significantly less and still get on all of the rides without having to wait for hours. But I think if it's someone who knows they're only going to get to go once, it's a once in a lifetime trip, they have a large enough budget, I could see the appeal. I still don't think it's worth it at every park.
I really think this is for like the top 1% of people, maybe 5%, maybe 5% of people,
2%,
like 2%, 2%. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who it's. I don't have friends that have this kind of money, but somebody out there, I'm sure does. It's like, I don't know if you're on the side of TikTok, Jackie. That's like the Amalfi Jets side of TikTok. Have you seen any of that? It's like the private jet people that like they take phone calls from clients and talk about that. There's some rumors about whether or not it's scripted, but it's entertaining to watch because it's these people that are just like, oh yeah, that's like $30,000. They're like, oh yeah, no problem. Like it's like no big deal. Okay. And it's like, oh yeah, there's like this whole branch of people out there that literally just don't care about money. Right. Like doesn't matter to them. And I'm like, that's who this is good for. Yes. Maybe. I still think I'd go VIP, but
yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said for the fact that Disney's VIP tours do sell out. So this is definitely an option for someone who wants to do a VIP tour, but doesn't book it enough in advance and gets locked out, right? And it's sold out, and they still want to have immediate access to these attractions at these parks. That's what I feel like this is for. It's those families of probably 5 or less that are in that situation, because once you get higher than about 5 in your family, that's when the cost just becomes drastically different from a VIP tour, right? The higher you go, the more it is because the Premier Pass is per person. So if you've got a family of probably 5 or less and you decide you want a VIP tour, but you look and it's not available, well, then this is your option, right? It still doesn't.
I still can't justify it to me. I'm just like, it's crazy.
Oh, I know. And that's
okay.
it. Like I said, I will literally never. I will literally never. But I could. I still think it's drastically overpriced. I still think it's drastically overpriced. I still think that they missed the mark on this, and it's just completely out of touch with the majority of their guests. But I understand the small itty bitty percentage that may want it too.
Yeah, and I mean, you also have to think of where Disney's coming from right now is that they're trying to pay for all these massive projects that they've promised the public. Like they've said, we're going to do Villains Land and Cars Land and Monsters and they just threw out like a whole bunch of stuff that now they got to pay for. That's what we see ticket prices go up every year, but we saw that happen, that everybody's ticket prices went up. This happened. Like they're going to just like find any way they can to get as much money as possible because they're going to try to fund these projects because they're not going to be, there might be people now that know those projects are coming and they put off going to the parks as well, which then could lose them revenue. So they're, from a business standpoint, they're trying to pay for all the things.
Right.
But at the same point, a lot of us are having a hard time financially. So it's not great in terms of the way it looks to all the rest of us.
Right. Well, and a lot of people have mentioned, when we read things online as people are responding and commenting and reacting to this announcement about this Premier Pass, is they're saying, well, this is the pass that Universal includes with their top level hotels. And yes, that is true. And yes, their price points are vastly different. Their parks are just vastly different. So it's really hard to compare price point to price point when it comes to the Universal Pass versus this new Premier Pass. But there is something to be said for the fact that Universal includes it in their deluxe resorts because they've had a hard time filling them.
Yeah.
So they almost have to give those extra perks to get the people to come and stay. Disney just doesn't have that problem with their deluxe resorts.
Right.
So it's just a different situation. So yes, it stinks that Universal is including this with their deluxe and Disney is not, but it's just not the same situation.
Nope. So
that being said, there's our response.
Is it worth it? For most people, no, it's not going to be worth it. For a few people, it might be.
And so the majority of us, it's not going to even be feasible to consider.
You don't even have to think about it. Nope. It's not even something you have to put on your radar. And it doesn't matter.
And it won't affect what we're already doing in the parks. It's not going to affect the multi-pass and single pass that we already have. It's really not going to affect that. You're not going to see this tremendous increase in these lightning lane lines and wait times. It's really not going to affect that. I really don't think it is.
No. And I would say, I think that the change from Genie Plus to the multi-pass system was the bigger one that was not great for the majority of people.
Agreed.
Yeah. The value of that went way down.
Yes. So that being said, thank you to those of you who have submitted Ask the Moms questions for us in the past. Again, Kate and I kind of chose this one knowing how timely it was. But if you've got questions for an upcoming trip or things that you need help answering, please send your questions our way. You are always welcome to reach out to us. We are at Mom Street USA on all of our social media platforms, or you can always find us momstreetusa@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us on our Discord channel. So we are part of the Walrus Carp Pocket Fam Discord. We have an entire Mom Street section on there that you can find us to ask questions on there, and our whole community can chime in if you prefer to kind of get a little bit of everybody's input. That's a great way to do it as well.
Yes. So next up, we have a new series that we're going to be starting, which is visiting with different ages of children. So we're going to start with visiting with an infant on our next episode, which will be a really fun series because it's different experiences when you go with different ages.
Yes. So we're going to kind of go through infant. I think the way we have it broken down, and this may shift as we kind of get into it, but right now we're looking at probably at least 5 episodes. So infant, toddler, elementary, preteen, and teenager. We may also need to throw in grandparents in there. I got that request from somebody in Pocket Fam, so we'll have to see as we move our way through this series how it kind of develops. And we really just want to answer those questions. We get tons of questions, especially about infants, right? Traveling with infants and what that looks like. So join us on our next episode, and we will do our very best to give you all the information we possibly can about that.
I think, okay. So I think that's it. Yeah. You covered it all, Jackie?
We did. We did.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode of Mom Street USA. We hope that learning some of these rope drop strategies will help you the next time you go to the park to feel a little bit less overwhelmed and have a better morning in the park, even if you're not a morning person. Jackie, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
I'm so glad we put this all in one place. I feel like this is going to be really helpful and that it's going to be something that people can refer back to. And again, we have those guides on Kate's website, disneysistern.com/momstreetusa that you can find if you're looking for a paper version of everything we spoke about today.
Yes. Well, thank you for being with us, and we will see you next time on Mom Street USA.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.